The movie begins with Jamora, where a man plays with his son Delgo. Meanwhile, the kingdom of Norin is distressed as their land is void of natural resources, and King Zon sends scouts to find a new home for them. They come across Jamora and the Lokni welcome them. Time passes and the tensions rise as the Norin take more land from the Lokni. Sedessa, Zon's sister, kills innocent Lokni against his wishes, and he disowns her. She attempts to kill him and his wife as they sleep and successfully kills his wife, but gets caught. Sedessa is found guilty of treason, and her wings are clipped off. She is then exiled to a land of savages. 15 years pass, and Sedessa walks into a room and tells the leaders that their relationship is over. They ask her about their agreement and the promises she made, and she instructs her engineer to pull a lever. A cage surrounds the leaders, and Sedessa takes over the monster kingdom. Meanwhile, Delgo and his friend Philo ride on two large beasts as Philo complains about the long road. Delgo suggests that they race and tease Philo for refusing. He agrees to race and they ride on their beasts as fast as possible. Delgo joins several wild beasts as he rides but gets knocked off a cliff. Philo cries as he thinks Delgo is dead but realizes he's hanging off a branch. Delgo instructs Philo to get help and Philo runs around as he doesn't know what to do. A Norin flies to Delgo and asks if he needs help, but he refuses, and the branch breaks. He begins falling, but the Norin woman catches him and carries him to safety. Philo returns as he sees that Delgo is alright, and two Norin generals emerge and knock Philo and Delgo down. They reveal that the Norin woman is Princess Kyla, and she tells them to leave the boys alone. Lokni soldiers emerge, and the Norin fly away. Kyla talks to her father and says she was alright until the generals attacked the Lokni boys. He says they were trying to protect her because the Lokni are their enemies, and she gets upset as she says she isn't a child that needs protection. Delgo returns to a sanctuary where Elder Marley teaches him how to control the special stones. They go to a large stone that floats above the water, and it shows how Delgo lost his parents during the last war. Marley tells Delgo he must let go of the past if he wants to control the stones properly. General Bogardus gambles with Reyes and other Norin men, and he raises his Razor Wing against Reyes. Reyes wins the round and takes the Razor Wing. They suddenly hear a loud noise from outside and see Lokni civilians attacking them. Reyes talks to King Zon and says the attacks were deliberate. He suggests they go to war against the Lokni, but Bogardus reminds them of the people they lost in the war. Reyes says they must fight back, not to look weak, and King Zon instructs them to send more soldiers to the border. Kyla floats around searching for her mother's jewelry, and a predator prepares to attack her. Delgo uses his pickaxe to knock it down, and she thanks him for saving her. She apologizes for the general's actions, and Delgo says he's alright. She says she's searching for her late mother's jewelry, and Delgo promises to help her find it. Meanwhile, Reyes meets Sedessa and tells her their plan to instigate a war are underway. Bogardus talks to the man in charge of their gambling games, and the man convinces him to bet using weapons from the kingdom. Bogardus reluctantly agrees and Reyes reports to the king. Bogardus is apprehended and placed in a cell. Reyes enters the Lokni sanctuary at night and destroys it. Delgo enters the destroyed sanctuary the following morning and sees Elder Marley rearranging the stones. He asks Marley why they don't want to fight the Norin, and Marley says they will fight only when the people are in danger. Delgo gets angry and says the Norin won't stop attacking until someone stops them. Meanwhile, Reyes meets Sedessa and tells her that war is imminent. She tells him to abduct Kyla and put the blame on the Lokni so that the war will occur immediately. Kyla talks to her friend in the room and her friend teases her by saying she's going on a date. She says she isn't going on a date and flies out. But Reyes follows her. She meets Delgo and they talk inside a cave with beautiful stones. Delgo gives her the jewelry and she talks about how her father never listens to her. Kyla says she doesn't want to forget about the past, and Delgo gets upset as he says his parents were killed in the war. He says they can't forget the past and calls her silly. Kyla gets upset and flies out of the cave. Delgo tries to apologize but gets knocked down by a razor wing. Reyes flies behind Kyla and knocks her out. Later, Reyes talks to the king and says Kyla was last seen searching for her jewelry. He says that the Lokni boys abducted her and the king instructs him to apprehend the boys. Delgo has a dream where he's a little boy and he plays with his parents. Several Norrin soldiers enter the building and kill his parents, but a soldier spares his life. He wakes up from the nightmare and is immediately apprehended by the Lokni soldiers. He and Philo are placed into a cage and they tell the king they have no idea where Kayla is. Bogardus accuses them of lying and Delgo says a white razor wing was following her last time they spoke. Bogardus realizes the razor wing is his and that Reyes is involved. Sedessa plays the harp and some guards take Kyla into the room. Kyla realizes who Sedessa is and calls her a murderer. She then says her father will send his best soldiers to find and free her, but Reyes emerges and she sees that he's working with Sedessa. In the dungeon, Delgo joins his belt to Philo's and uses it to open the cage's door. He gets an idea and tells Bogardus they'll release him if he flies them into the pit. Bogardus agrees, but a flying animal grabs the belt as they pass it to him. Delgo instructs Philo to make the cage swing as he stands on it and gets Bogardus' cage. He opens the cage and enters right before a guard sees them. King Zahn gets angry and decides to declare war against the Lokni. The Norrin leaders, called the Stone Sages, receive the declaration and say they can't stand and do nothing while the Lokni attack them. They all make their decision using the special stones and they decide to go to war. Meanwhile, Delgo and the others move through a cave and Philo gets startled as he sees a baby Yogg. Its mother emerges and they scream as it attacks them. Bogardus dodges its attacks, but it knocks his sword down and grabs him. Delgo grabs its baby and the Yogg stares at him. It pursues him as he runs and he maneuvers and makes it lie on his back. Bogardus shakes Delgo's hand and they make their way out of the cave. They approach Lokni territory and Bogardus says he will go and save the princess by himself, but Delgo refuses. They see an abandoned building full of guards and Bogardus takes them down. The trio stands in the building and watches as a strange bird flies to Reyes' house. Bogardus says the bird could lead them to Kyla and they follow it. In the Savage Lands, the beasts welcome Sedessa and the trio arrives. They see that Sedessa wants to cut Kyla's wings and Delgo instructs Philo to cause a distraction. He decides to save the princess and Bogardus fights a man that attacks him. Sedessa motivates the people and says they will claim Jamora as theirs. Philo struggles to cause a distraction, but the men roar and cannot hear him. He then rings a gong that gets everyone's attention and Sedessa sees Delgo. Delgo makes his way to the platform and fights off the men that attack him. He frees Kyla, and she carries him and flies away from their attackers. They meet Bogardus, who's still fighting, and he instructs them to escape while he saves Philo. Delgo and Kyla leave the building, and he tells her to inform her father of what is happening, while he holds back the attackers. Delgo climbs a statue as he escapes, but falls off and lands in a building. Meanwhile, Sedessa's engineer follows Kyla and attempts to capture her. Delgo runs as several men pursue him and he sees a large creature flying around. Some men approach him and he gets an idea as he sees a helmet. Kyla flies around as the evil engineer follows her and Bogardus emerges and helps her. The engineer tries to attack him with his flimsy contraption, but it doesn't work and Bogardus attacks him. Delgo puts his special stone in the helmet and uses it to distract the men as he escapes. The men see him as he stands by the edge and he jumps off and lands on a flying beast. Bogardus pursues the engineer and uses his sword to short-circuit his contraption, causing him to crash. Delgo causes the soldiers on the creature to fall off and he takes charge. Meanwhile, the Norrin goes to war with the Lokni and the Stone Sages join the fight. Kyla enters the palace and Gilmore tells her that King Zahn is on the battlefield. He says that Reyes will be searching for her and she realizes he's working with Sedessa. She knocks Gilmore down and says she didn't mention that Reyes is their enemy. The beasts from the Savage Land arrive at Jamora and fight against the Lokni. The Savages enter the king's tent and abduct him. Sedessa enters the palace and walks to the throne. The king realizes that Reyes has betrayed the kingdom and he is working with Sedessa. Bogardus emerges and fights Reyes, while a savage man takes the king to the palace. They fight as they fly, and Reyes tells Bogardus he has taught him everything he knows. He knocks down Bogardus' weapon. Bogardus distracts him by throwing his jewelry in the air. Reyes stares at it, and Bogardus takes his sword and stabs him. Delgo flies on the giant creature and jumps on Kyla's creature. They arrive at the king's tent, and Bogardus saves Delgo as a savage shoots an arrow at him. The arrow hits Bogardus and he falls to the ground. Delgo realizes he's the soldier that spared his life, and he dies. Sedessa meets the king and she says his reign is over. Delgo gets angry and Kyla says he can't give up because Bogardus didn't give up. As he sees some creatures running, he gets an idea and gives Kyla a message to pass the Narin soldiers. Delgo goes to the palace and tries to save the king, but is forced to fight Sedessa's guard. The guard overpowers him and he hits it with a statue, but it doesn't knock it down. Elsewhere, Philo causes several large beasts to run towards the battlefield, and the Narin carry the Lokni as they fly. The beasts cause the savage people to retreat as they run towards them. Delgo uses his special stone to fight the guard, but it gets broken. He masters the stone, reforms it, and attacks the guard. The guard accidentally destroys several pillars, and the building begins to fall. Sedessa hangs by the edge and begs for help. The Delgo decide to be merciful. He hands her a chain and rushes to save the king from the falling debris. Kyla arrives and meets Delgo, but Sedessa emerges and attacks them. She tries to stab Kyla, but hits her jewelry. The ground beneath her destroys, and she falls to her death. Kyla carries Delgo as the trio leave the falling building, and they go to the battlefield where the soldiers of both tribes celebrate together. Reyes attempts to kill Delgo, but a soldier stops him and Philo breaks the spear before it hits him. They continue to celebrate, and Delgo holds Kyla as they kiss. The end. Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos, and please make sure to subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. See you next time.